So I appreciate everybody joining us. We're going to have a really good conversation. I'm just thrilled to be able to have the three participants with us, and Kenny's going to help facilitate as well. He'll monitor the chat box and the chat screen, and we'll continue to try and get folks into the session, but we want to make a good use of the conversation. So please do feel free to ask questions in the discussion forum. We've got three young professionals that I'm particularly proud of, and it turns out I was able to be a little bit a part of each one of them in reference to the work that they've been doing, and so I appreciate that quite a bit. And so just real briefly, because I'm pleased to be able to have these folks. So Alison Prince, who's from the president and CEO of the United Way here in the Brazos Valley. She's been doing that job since 2014, and then has been actually with the United Way since 2008. And one of the fun things as well is that all three of these folks were students at the Bush School in one capacity. And Allison was one of the first nonprofit management students that I had when I was here. So we just clarified that she was indeed in my program evaluation course. So that was fun. And also was honored to be able to be part of the United Way board that was making a few good decisions when we actually hired Allison into that position. It took us a little while, but we finally got it figured out. And so we're thrilled to be able to have you here, Allison Prince. You'll pardon me, we've got two Allisons, but I couldn't help myself. So Bree Bess is another participant in the panel. She's a program officer at BlueCross, BlueShield, South Carolina Foundation. She's been with them since 2016. She tends to do a lot of her work with nonprofit organizations and helping them think about the way that they put together their proposals in order to be able to submit high quality applications to this foundation and to address the strategic objectives of the foundation. Bree is also an alum of the Bush School, and so I'm thrilled to be able to have you here and look forward to this conversation. I got a chance to talk to Bree probably about maybe 3 or 4 months ago and got to hear a lot about what she was doing, and very impressed with that. And then the third panelist is Allison Pennington, who joins us from the Greater Texas Foundation. Allison is the Programs and Strategy Associate there. She's probably the newly minted graduate. She recently graduated from the Bush. She joined Greater Texas Foundation in this position in March of 2017. She was a research associate before that. Comes to us also from South Carolina, which is kind of neat, so that we've got a little bit of a crossover there in reference to, and they were just talking about the fact that they switched with each other as Allison joined us here at the Bush School. Allison also comes with a teaching and an educational background, so she served as a teacher for a while. So with that, I'll go around and I'll just ask each of them to kind of introduce what they've been doing, how things have been going with their with the foundations that they're working with, or with the groups that they're working with, and the way that they think about some of their grant allocations. Feel free as well to give a little bit of background about your organizations if you want to give people a little bit more context in the way that you think about who you are. Kenny's also observation was earlier as we were chatting about some of this is one of the things that makes sort of conversations with funders so fascinating is everybody's a little different. Everybody's a little bit approaches. It's a really interesting time to be operating as a nonprofit organization in our communities, and we're fortunate to be able to have really thoughtful people like these three doing work and really thinking and taking it carefully and trying to do the right thing, and to try and be able to frame that in a way that helps us make a difference. But it's tricky times. We all know that as leading these organizations is part of what we're about. And so feel free to take a few minutes. Allison, I'll go just the way I introduced. Alison Prince, we'll let you go first, and then we'll just work our way through. Talk a little bit about who you are, what your organization is doing, and any of the things that you may have done to try and both respond. I mean, initially this was put together thinking about the COVID and all that had to be done in reference to that, and how I know many foundations have adjusted and responded to that. But we continue to see a turbulent and troubling environment out there with racial equity concerns and injustice concerns. And you're free or welcome to address those or touch on those topics if you feel like your work is trying to address some of those concerns as well. But I don't mean to, more or less, how do you respond to the turbulent and interesting environments that we find ourselves in these days? So Alison Prince, you want to say a few words and get us started? Oh, got to unmute you.
Here, I thought I was on mute and I started talking to myself, sorry. Won't be the first time I make that mistake, probably. Well, thank you so much for facilitating this and for including me on the panel. I really am honored to do that. I just want to give a couple shout outs real quickly, because Allison Pennington is not only another panelist, but she's also a United Way board member, current board member. Will is a former board member, and I also see Debbie Eller on the call. And apparently my board chair wanted to be so much part of this call that he's calling me on my cell phone right now. So I apologize that I got distracted there for a second. You know, at United Way of the Brazos Valley, you know, we say that kind of our anthem is that we fight for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in the Brazos Valley. I think to address the racial equity comment that you said, that's just beginning for us. We don't exactly know our position, and that is a hard place to be. And I think that's an area that we're exploring currently and will continue to do so into the future. You know, in general, we provide grant funding to nonprofits, and we have 22 nonprofit partners currently. I saw at least one of them is on the call today. I saw Ron Crozier with Twin City Mission, where we provide funding for their programs, for specific programs around education, financial stability, and health, creating measurable impact in our community. We're still committed to that, and we'll still continue to do that. In fact, we're coming to the end of a fiscal year and about to start another fiscal year in which this is not a reapplication year that agencies carry over. This was actually a third-year extension that we had done. We do a 2-year grant cycle typically, and we had already done planned an extension into the third year because we were supposed to be going through our community impact study and strategic planning process. Will, you probably, well, you might have missed it, Matt, right after I became CEO. I think you rolled off the board before I took the board through that process 5 years ago. We do a community impact study every 5 years where we kind of go back out to the community and reestablish, are we working on the right things? Are we prioritizing the right things around education, financial stability, and health? And we reestablish kind of what are our goals and our investment objectives going to be over the next 5 years. So we had started that several months ago, and the board was going to be going through a intense strategic planning process with the results of that, taking the results of those and forming them into our organizational goals, but also then into operational goals of how does the organization support those investment goals. But of course, COVID-19 interrupted that. So we've kind of pumped the brakes on that right now. The community impact study is about, I would say about 90% of the way done, and we're going to pick that up here in the next month and go ahead and finish it out. But our strategic plan, we kind of had to go back and you know, a conversation that I had with the board 2 months ago was, I'm not really sure if we can set our strategies for the next 5 to 6 years when we don't even know what the next 5 to 6 months are going to look like. And so we just kind of gave ourselves the permission to pause that work. And right now we're living a little bit more in probably a little more day-to-day than I want to be, but right now a little day-to-day, being responsive to the urgent needs of our community. None of us saw COVID coming in January. I'm not sure, you know, the racial inequities that we're experiencing or the unrest around that, I think some could say you've seen that coming for a long time. For it to happen right now, I don't know that we would have projected that to be happening in the midst of a pandemic, a global pandemic, but it's where we are. And so every day it seems to be becoming a little more uncertain around those strategic plans and those long-term goals. And it's becoming right now just a little bit of a day-to-day response. But real quickly, I'll touch on what we did in response to COVID-19, and then I'll let the other panelists kind of do their introduction. In response, we responded pretty quick. We knew that there were going to be a lot of needs. And something that I had said to my staff one morning was, you know, United Way plays a role in times of disaster a lot of times, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or floods or whatever. We serve as the kind of financial manager of donations. So we will deploy a disaster relief fund, collect money on behalf of the county, and then work with a group of organizations called the Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster to distribute those funds. And we've done that for years, since Katrina Rita. And so we were kind of gearing up for that, but this disaster is different than anything else in that, if you want to think of it in the terms of disaster response, in that it impacts every corner of the community. There's not a corner of the community that's been untouched. Every single person has either had to socially distance, or they've lost their job, or been furloughed, or whatever the situation is. And so I knew that it was going to quickly grow beyond the capacity of what United Way could do. And so I had said, let's be open to working with unlikely partners in order to address this, because this is bigger than any of us. And about that time, I got a phone call, and within a matter of a few days, we formed the Brazos Valley COVID-19 Community Relief Fund. It was a partnership between us, or still is a partnership between us, the Community Foundation of the Brazos Valley, Bryan College Station Chamber of Commerce. I see you on the phone, Royce, and the City of Bryan and City of College Station. And the idea was, we're going to do one relief fund, raise as much money as we can, and not only support nonprofits, but also support small businesses. And that's an unlikely partner in our world. Typically, nonprofits don't exist to support small businesses, not at least financially support small businesses. But at United Way, we try to think about things at the root cause of what's really causing the issues. And ultimately, if small businesses fail, more people are going to have needs. And if more people have needs, it's going to be a greater strain on all of our social services. And so we said, if we could prevent people from being laid off or furloughed, we could prevent the needs from ever happening. And so we provided grant funding to small businesses for payroll and rent assistance, and then to nonprofits providing rent, utility assistance, and food assistance to individuals in need. Before we knew it, the City of Bryan came in with a $500,000 match, which kind of upped the game for all of us. And in total, over about 8 weeks, we raised just over $1.2 million. We have already administered $1,181,000 of it. Yes, I know these numbers a little too well. We had a community volunteer panel of 8 people that helped us administer those funds. And then the remaining funds that are left, we're wrapping up our work around small business and supporting small businesses. We know there's still a lot of needs, but we also know they're starting to open back up, as well as the payroll protection programs have stepped in. It's actually getting a little bit confusing for them of, well, I've gotten payroll protection assistance, now what do I do with these funds? The City of Bryan, the City of College Station has a lot going on right now for assistance to small businesses, and the City of Bryan is following suit as well with some additional funding. So we just felt like our work there, we had done quite a bit. We provided right at $1 million of that almost 1.2 million to small businesses. So we're wrapping that up, and the ongoing work that we'll do as we kind of transition into not quite long-term, but mid-term response is supporting those nonprofits and continuing to support nonprofits. So we'll hold the fund open for a few more months and continue responding as things are needed.
Great, thank you, Allison. That's an excellent introduction. I got several questions, but I think I want to go on ahead and let everybody do their response. Bree, I saw you reacting as well, so why don't you go on ahead and give a little bit of background and fill in, and feel free to build on what Alison Prince just said, Mrs. Prince just said.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you could probably tell from the name, I actually work for a corporate foundation. So our kind of corporate funder is the BlueCross BlueShield of South Carolina business. And so they are our only source of funding. And so that has been really interesting to be a corporate funder during this time, because obviously insurance has been greatly affected during this period, and our parent company, so to speak, has been doing quite a bit around COVID. And so for us as a corporate foundation, kind of figuring out our role has been interesting. So the BlueCross Foundation is the only statewide health foundation in South Carolina, and really one of the only statewide foundations, period. And so we've had a really large reach during this time. And so as it comes to COVID, it's definitely been interesting. You know, I think that everyone can probably laugh at this, but our board, you know, kept saying to us, well, where's the data? Where's the data to show that what you're asking of us is what's happening? And we're like, well, it's happening right now. Like we don't have data yet. We're still working on it. And so that's definitely been an interesting process. But what's really been great is our state actually started to come together around the census a few months back. So really kind of last summer into the fall, our statewide association of United Ways, our statewide association of nonprofits, and then the South Carolina Grantmakers Network. We had all started to really for the first time have continuing ongoing conversations, partnerships, and so really from that work, we were able to dive right in with COVID relief work and all be in communication about what's going on, what's happening. You know, our United Way Association has a lot more experience with advocacy and all that's involved there, as well as our nonprofit association. And so that, you know, with federal funding changing what felt like every day and all of those things, it was really great to have all of these different partners at the table and all those different levels of expertise. And so that has been a joy and a terror to work on and work together. And so we were able to launch 1SC. So it was actually a reactivation of our emergency fund from the 2015 floods that affected most of South Carolina. And so that fund had actually been spent down and was just dormant. And then just through conversation, we were able to reactivate it, get money in the door, and we were able to raise about $3 million. And I think to date, or I think as of today, I think we've distributed 2.4. So that's been kind of a statewide response. And so that's been really great to work with. And this morning, I just actually got off a call with our South Carolina Grantmakers Network, you know, with foundations all over the state, kind of talking about what's going on, who they're funding, what's funding, because what we realized really early on is everyone was deploying money all at once. And so it was a little chaotic, very chaotic actually. And so what we wanted to make sure is that we were getting money to the places that need it. The vast majority of South Carolina is very rural. And so we wanted to make sure that not just the city centers were getting the funds. And so we all kind of had to scrounge through our Rolodexes and really get to the community leaders in the rural areas much more than just you know, the big nonprofit hubs. And so, yeah, that's definitely been an experience. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of our COVID response. Oh, as a state, our COVID response as a foundation, we launched kind of some quick response COVID relief grants to our existing grantees. Because those had already been financially vetted, and we already had, you know, all of their financial forms and audits, so we didn't need to kind of go through that rigmarole. And so we were able to deploy those funds within a month. From application to activation, it took about a month. So that was really good and helpful. I think our concerns were the health of the nonprofit sector. So wanting to support these nonprofits to ensure that our nonprofit sector continued to remain active and was able to continue to keep their doors open and serve these people. And so kind of the quick response of our board and allowed us to do that. That was really a great experience. It was also, I would say, a mixed experience, in all honesty, because I think we as a staff, you know, we're reading a Nonprofit Quarterly and Chronicle Philanthropy about, you know, just get those dollars out to support operating expenses and things like that. And, you know, ultimately, when we presented that to our board, they were more shaky on that. They wanted more to benefit the individual, and how could we, you know, assist these low-income individuals who are really struggling. And so ultimately, we kind of had to compromise and do kind of the best of both worlds to support staff to assist and directly assist. So we did a lot of like case management and kind of care coordination and things like that to ensure at the United Ways that they had the capacity to serve the vast influx of people that they were receiving. So it was definitely a lot of back and forth and a lot of learning as you go. But it's been a good experience, all from my kitchen. So it's hard not to get to see all my partners, but I worked out for the best.
Bree, thank you very much. That's excellent. And again, I got some good follow-ups, and I may also look to Kenny to follow up. But Allison Pennington, why don't you go on ahead and give us a bit what you got going on, and then we'll use that as an opportunity to reflect back on some of what you just taught, what everybody's been talking about.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's joined. I know this is a time when probably a lot of you are experiencing even greater emotional load and mental load and financial load and other stressors than normal. And so it's especially meaningful that you all took time to participate in this conversation today, and I hope it's helpful. So Greater Texas Foundation is a private foundation based in Bryan, Texas, and everything we do is centered on helping more Texans complete a post-secondary credential, whether it's a certificate, associate's, or bachelor's degree. We're a statewide funder, and as you know, Texas is a very large, very complex state, and so a lot of our work centers on trying to make sure that we understand the larger forces at play that can make it difficult for a student to to achieve their post-secondary goals, and then doing what we can to remove those barriers at an institutional and regional and statewide level. We have always had a focus on really trying to make sure we're focusing resources on students who have not been served well by the system as it is, and that includes students of color. And so the events of the past few weeks have really pushed us, as Alison Prince was saying, to stop and reflect, to think about what have we been doing and what more could we be doing to make sure that Texans of color are getting what they need. And we don't have the answers right now, but it's something that is urgent and imperative that we continue to work on. In terms of COVID response, Bree, I really appreciate what you said about having to try to find that balance between meeting immediate needs and making sure that funding is getting down to individuals, but also tending to the longer term health of our grantees and other organizations, and thinking about what needs are going to be in the long run, because this is not a problem that's going to just get cleared up in a month or two. So our response has been threefold. One is we had to become a lot more agile than we're used to being to respond to grant opportunities that popped up immediately in response to what was happening with the virus. So the primary thing that we've been able to do so far is to work with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to establish a statewide emergency aid fund that 2- and 4-year institutions could apply for, so that they could get some extra funding to pass through to their students in the form of emergency aid grants. These grants are a really important tool to help students continue on their pathway to a degree, so that unexpected expenses and loss of income due to COVID don't knock them off or slow them down on their pathway. So we were really glad that we were able to do that. I was just checking the numbers. So far, at least what they've announced publicly, that fund raised about $711,000, and grants were made to 57 institutions so far. So that was kind of our big push initially, was to figure out how to get that fund up and going. And then we have a couple other things in the pipeline we're still working on that are also, that just cropped up this spring in response to immediate needs. And I've been really impressed by the organizations we've been communicating with, who are taking the lead on this and are quickly sort of shifting resources over and coming up with plans and trying to figure out how they can use the resources they have to serve students in need. I've been in awe of what they've been able to do, and excited that as the foundation we can lend support to that work. So the second strand of our response has really just been to take a look at what we were doing before COVID and ask ourselves, is that still what we need to be doing? And the answer was a resounding yes. I mean, it was hard to complete a post-secondary credential before the pandemic. It's even harder now for a lot of reasons that you all are familiar with. And so we took a small pause to just reflect on our strategy and on the grants in our pipeline, and determined that, yeah, the best thing to do is to continue moving those forward. Now, our review process now includes conversation with applicants about how this work might look different in the post-COVID environment, and what parts of the work are the most urgent and relevant now given the environment. But honestly, we're continuing business as usual, because much of the work that was under discussion before is needed even more now. And then just real briefly, the third part of our response is trying to look ahead, to think about how this huge event might change the way higher ed works in the future. Obviously, the pandemic has been devastating. But one thing that we're seeing is that it is forcing people to try new ways of delivering education and support to students, new ways of using time and resources. And some of these things might end up being good for students in the long run, because necessity is the mother of invention. There have been a lot of thorny problems we've been wrestling with in higher education for a long time. And in some ways, I think we are all being forced to contend with those problems in a different way. So we're trying to look ahead into the future to think about what might be some innovative models and approaches we can support that have grown out of the pandemic. And maybe these are practices that we need to hang on to even as things settle down.
Allison, thanks. That's great. Kenny, do you mind if I toss to you for a second, see if you've got some reactions to those initial summaries and thoughts or questions that you might want to put out there?
Yeah, I was actually just getting ready to field or just a reminder out to folks that's joining us. Thank you. So I'll just verbally relay it for joining us today, and to not hesitate if you have any questions. But Allison Pennington just actually referred to one of the first questions that I really had is, as you as funders have thought about what's going on in your individual communities, let's say on some level we can assume that many of our nonprofits have had to shift to more of a focus on basic needs. Does that provide any pressure, or what type of conversations have you had to also shift in thinking about what your giving strategy is, or what you give to? So Allison just made it actually a perfect lead in, saying that our mission was important yesterday, it still is today. We're still going to center there. But I wonder whether from peers across the country, in our local community, have you felt any pressure as funders to have a hard look at what you give to, if there's a general sense that basic needs are what's important right now?
I would say that Bree mentioned something that I agree with, the pressure, or I don't know if it's pressure or data that says support operations, and how challenging that is to translate to other stakeholders. So to the board members or donors or whatever that the funds are going to support. Right now, something as simple as keeping the lights on in a nonprofit, and but that's not getting to the individual. It's not getting to the individual. Well, actually, it is. If there isn't a physical facility for them to operate out of, or whatever that is, then they cease to exist. So I don't know that we're necessarily feeling pressure. We're definitely hearing it from our partners. We do a call with our ongoing partners every month, and ours was actually on Tuesday this week, and we heard a lot that what they're seeing from their clients, the needs are around basic needs. Basic needs are a part of what we do. It's very hard to work on educational goals around high school graduation and things like that if your really basic needs aren't being met. So basic needs kind of intertwine into education, financial stability, and health across the board. So that's already an aspect of an area that agencies can receive funding from us for. But we are talking about it. We're talking about, could we allow them to shift funding for a year to kind of where needed most, where it's needed most. I've reached out to another United Way to ask them how they fund in an ongoing manner of, is it organizational funding that they're able to then do with however they need to, or is it specific to a program? Because I think back in the day, years ago for United Ways, I think it was at more of an organizational level. And over the years, because probably a lot of donors, the push from donors has been to, we want to see the impacts of our gifts. We want to see how it's changing lives, and that's hard to do just at a broader level. So we have to narrow in on a specific program. Or it's hard for, if you provide funding to one organization that has 35 programs or even 5 programs, for them to complete the reporting required to give us a picture of what the impacts of their work are. So I think that's why we've gone into the program model of funding. But yes, I do think that the mission that we had yesterday is even more so important today than it was yesterday. And so we will continue down that path. But I think there's also kind of an awareness of that the world is changing, and we kind of have to be, one of the principles that we hold ourselves to is to be an adaptive organization. And I think we need to ask others to do that as well, is to be adaptive to their communities. And that's, I think, something that if we're going to do that, if we need to be adaptive to our community, then we need to be adaptive with how we administer our mission in our community as well.
Right, thanks. And Bree, I was maybe just a quick follow-up, because another point that you alluded to, especially as a corporate foundation, just thinking about any sense from, again, any of the panelists around, we know that there's a big desire to get money out into the communities. You mentioned the example of making sure that it's hitting our rural communities. But one question I've just kind of generally been inquiring with, several folks that I interact with is, what are you all's thoughts about folks being able to deliver on, or nonprofit organizations being able to deliver on, whatever your social return expectations are? So, maybe could you, touch on that for us, whether Bree or anyone else?
Yeah, so that's definitely been kind of an interesting time. And so one of the things that we've really been aiming for in all of this is flexibility with our grantees, and kind of giving a lot of grace, because everyone's just kind of running around like chickens with their heads cut off in a lot of ways. And so, so in all honesty, our social return, or our expectations for return on these investments is slim to none. We know that the work is getting done. We know that, really we've been using more kind of process measures rather than kind of true outcomes. We're not going to get outcomes from this work at this time. We're really just serving kind of those basic needs. And so really just, food out the door, rental assistance, those are the measures of success that we're using right now. Again, we're not gonna get a full-scale evaluation and all of that stuff right now. So for our COVID grants, at least, we're just kind of giving a lot of grace.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think it's a little bit different in our portfolio, because a lot of the work that we support is not necessarily direct service to students right now, but it's more research, program development, collective impact, trying to get organizations to work together long term on some of these thorny issues with our education system. And so for us, I'll second what Bree said. Flexibility has been key. We've really just been trying to respond by staying in communication with our grantees and let them tell us what they need. And what we've heard from a lot of them is, our work is continuing. It's being done, like maybe we're converting some of our convenings to virtual, or we're handling our mentoring over Zoom instead of in person, but it's continuing. Other folks have some delays with their work or their projects that we are able to work around. But I mean, for the most, we have not heard from anybody who has said, we just can't do this work anymore. They're all continuing. It's just looking a little different than what we originally would have thought.
Good. Thank you. One of the things I was curious about, if you could reflect on a little bit, is some of what you're seeing in the field a little bit. I know that you've been very busy with your own work and trying to be able to adjust, but Alison Prince, you mentioned, you talk to other United Ways, you hear what some of those folks are doing. I know each one of you are connected in a variety of ways to different streams of funders, and Bree, you talked about it as well. So just if you could just kind of, I appreciate hearing sort of the way your organizations are responding, but thinking a little bit about some of the themes we're hearing already and the way other funders are reacting or responding similar or different to what you see your own organizations doing. Who wants to? It's open for anybody who wants to take a stab at it.
Well, that's one of the nicest things about being with the United Way is that we're part of a network of hundreds and thousands of United Ways across the country. And I was on a call this morning with probably about 40 other United Ways here in Texas that we're meeting every other week and having conversations every other week. United Way Worldwide is doing a lot of work on supporting United Ways during this time. This is a time where this is a quieter time in our typical fundraising model. This is a quieter season. We're kind of in between campaigns. We just wrapped up the fall campaign and got all the results for that, and we're about to start the next fall campaign. But United Ways, we survive on payroll deductions. So we do workplace campaigns and employees make a gift through payroll deduction. But a lot of United Ways are feeling COVID even harder. While we haven't felt it immediately, we will be over the next 6 to 12 months as employees are laid off and our corporate partners don't have the payrolls that they used to have. Their employees are no longer going to be giving to United Way if they're no longer working there. So there's a lot of planning in that world. United Way Worldwide and United Ways across the country have been really going through what we're calling a digital transformation as it is. I think United Ways in some ways missed the digital boat several years ago and are now swimming upstream to catch up. But I think COVID-19 has been an opportunity for United Ways to really show what they're made of. And I think United Ways across the country have done a really, really good job. We are positioned well for this work. We are positioned well we already had the fundraising mechanisms in place to start a fund in a matter of 48 hours. We have the staff capacity. A lot of United Ways have the staff capacity that we took the lead on a lot of the administrative work of our fund because I have a communications person who can work on the branding of it. I have a community impact person who does grants on a regular basis. And so she could, while reviewing small business applications was stretched all of our skills, looking at small business financials are very different than nonprofits, and it changes your view of small businesses quite a bit. But we have the mechanisms in place in order to do these things. So we were able to deploy very quickly. So relying on each other and being able to have that has been nice. What we're hearing across the country is, or not even across the country, across the state, basic needs are still where a lot of people live right now. It kind of goes back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we can't really talk about the long-term stuff. Like Bree said, like the expectation of impact right now, it's that we're feeding people, it's that people get to eat a meal tomorrow, or that they have their rent paid. I somehow a woman yesterday somehow got my cell phone number, and she was needing her rent paid. She's a bus driver for the school district. And in a matter of 30 minutes, we had it taken care of for this next month through partners. And it was kind of nice because, in my role, I don't often talk to people that are needing that direct assistance, or I refer them to 211. And that's probably what I should have done. And I'm sure my staff were probably like, what did you do via email? I did have to go back to her and kindly ask her not to share my cell phone number with other people. But we're working as quickly and fast as we can. And it's just living in basic needs. When you hear that, when you hear somebody literally almost crying on the phone because they're a bus driver, they haven't worked since the week before spring break, and they're not going to work again until August. And even in your best matter of planning, there's no, that is likely not a position that has a salary that can provide an emergency fund that is that big. No matter how much we preach emergency funds for individuals and for families, we're getting to the point where those are running out. And so the needs are really, whatever was there is running out and those needs are not going away. So I think we're still going to be living the basic needs. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to be there for a while. Like, we have to address those basic needs. We have to address those.
Bree or Allison Pennington, did you guys want to chime in on that a little bit?
Yeah, so kind of the philanthropic field as a whole in South Carolina, it's been interesting. So we actually, I don't know why now that I think about it, but we actually have 2 calls a week altogether. So we meet every Wednesday at 9 a.m. and then we meet every Thursday at 10 a.m. I'm realizing now how silly that is. But I guess our Wednesday call is more information receiving. So we have guest speakers come and talk to us from Department of Employment and Department of Social Services, what's going on with SNAP benefits, what's going on with WIC benefits, and so that's kind of more inward. And then our Thursday calls are more information sharing about what's going on, who's funding what, and a lot of this has been just asking people questions. I'm not as familiar with this organization. We haven't funded this organization in the past. I know you have. What's been your experience? And so, we've really kind of used those times to come together as foundations. And so we really haven't done that before. It's kind of, not been territorial, but more playing things close to the vest. And so this has just kind of busted that wide open. It's like, all of us are like, I don't know what's going on. We'll just talk about it. So, it's part information sharing, part therapy, but it's definitely been really good for our sector. And so our hope is, and kind of what we talked about today in our meeting, is how to continue this, how to keep this in to the next 12 months, 12 years, us continuing these relationships. And so, nonprofits aren't having to go to 15 different foundations to fund their organization. And there's been talks about a common application and a common budget form, and that's kind of my dream. And I feel like it's probably every nonprofit's dream that we would all use the same dang budget form. But yeah, so it's definitely been helpful for our sector to be forced to be in constant communication, and while never seeing each other. Because I tell people that 90% of my job is really the meetings that happen after the meetings in the parking lot or after lunch and things like that. And so it's been really hard to manufacture that. So that's definitely been kind of interesting. And so using other people's relationships and leveraging that. That's kind of what South Carolina's field looks like.
Thanks, Bree. Allison Pennington, did you want to chime in too? Give us some thoughts.
Just that I'm super jealous of Bree. That sounds like an amazing way for everyone to collaborate. And at GTF, we have collaborative groups like that are focused on specific issues. So like every other year when our legislature is in session, we try to have kind of regular check-in calls with some of our fellow funders. We're a member of a collaborative that focuses on rural Texas, and actually have a call with them at 1. So we have some of these like very specific collaborations, but I'm definitely seeing the need to stay in closer touch with our peers to see how we can work together. I'll give a quick shout out to Will and Kinney and their team, who are helping funders here in the Brazos Valley start having some of those conversations, and I appreciate that so much. We are a statewide funder, but we also have, we are interested in what happens with our neighbors in our own backyard. And so I've been starting to learn more about who else is here in our community and to think about ways that the foundation can be helpful just right here with our local students.
Great. So go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, one question that we fielded from the audience has to do, and I think this is general enough for any of the panelists, is just how are your boards reacting to the environment that we're operating in? And personally, as leaders in the space on the ground, how do you manage that, or any tips that you can provide to our nonprofit operators and leaders around you know, what shifted for you in working with your boards?
Could you repeat the first part of that? The first
Yeah,
part?
just general reaction to how your board are thinking about this new environment that we're operating in, just how they think about it, what's been their reaction, are they more engaged, less engaged, not available? What's been the general reaction from your boards of directors?
Allison, you're my board member. You want to answer that one?
Well, I was sick at the last board meeting, so I don't know how we reacted.
There's the answer.
I can talk about our board.
There you go. Go ahead.
So I will say our board has been very engaged, very concerned with what's happening, and they are really just asking staff what we are seeing and hearing in our conversations. Every time now that we have a proposal in front of them, they want to know, have you talked to this person about how COVID has impacted their work? Can it still happen? How is this going to work virtually? And I mean, thankfully, we're having those conversations anyway. It's hard not to. So we've been able to keep them informed. So we're definitely staying busy. I mean, we're trying to provide them with information as quickly as we can, and it's information that we need to do our work anyway. I think the conversations that we have been having, I just kind of echo the point that I made earlier, that we're still trying to find what the right balance is between meeting immediate needs, but also making sure that we have some capital and some resources for the needs that are going to still be around for a long time. So I think we feel some pressure to like really funnel a lot of our dollars in like directly into the hands of students, which would not be a bad thing, and it's needed. But I mean, we could spend out our entire endowment on basic needs and run out in a few months. And when that's gone, what happens? We also know that when fall starts, I mean, it's happening now, but especially in the fall, K-12 schools and colleges are going to be dealing with learning loss. They're going to be dealing with student attrition and mobility. There are tons of students out there who don't have reliable internet access, and that's going to be a really important resource for them to have. So yeah, we are having conversations with the board about how we can be responsive now, but know that this is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah, I think for our board, you know, we're not just a funder, we're also a fundraiser. And so that's where we have kind of an extra level of challenge, because this is hitting us pretty hard in the fundraising world, as it is for a lot of nonprofits that are, you know, we lost the spring fundraising season for a lot of our nonprofit partners. We don't have any major fundraisers in the spring. We had one small fundraiser we were going to start that we had to postpone. But so I think that's where we're kind of engaging our board, is around what are they hearing from the business world, and how is that going to play into our campaign in the year ahead, and collections on our current campaign that we just wrapped up. And how do we go about fundraising? You know, if we can't go into workplaces, if workplaces are not having rooms of 30 people to 100 people together where we can come in and talk about United Way and make an ask for support, how do we do our business? How do we raise our funds? So we're engaging them around that and beginning to reach out. We have actually a call this afternoon I have a call this afternoon with a handful of board members to talk about events and how are we going to do those, because we did have last year we started a luncheon, a campaign kickoff luncheon that was really successful for a first year event. We were excited to see it return this year. It's scheduled for August 4th, you know, to coincide with the kickoff of our campaign, which campaign will kick off, but we can't have 450 people in a room together in August. So how do we do that? How do we shift some things around? We've already made the decision of how we're going to shift and have a different event serve as our campaign kickoff, but it's not a fundraising event. So last year we used that as a fundraiser, raised a pretty significant amount of money. So how do we find that someplace else amid a year that we expect higher pledge losses or unpaid pledges anyways? So yeah, it's interesting conversations right now. I think our board probably feels the way that I do, but intensified, because they're not in it every single day. I try to always remember that they all have their business every single day. And Allison's a unique board member and that she works in the nonprofit industry every single day. And I've got a couple board members that are pretty closely tied to the nonprofit industry every day. But then there's other ones that are, business. And they live in the business world. And so they're thinking of this from a very different perspective. So, it's something that I try to, on every board meeting, have some time for some strategic discussions anyways. And so it's been the topic of our strategic discussions is what do we look like and what do we do? And some of that is to build some consensus and some engagement from the board no matter what, that there's always something that they can help us plan and help us be a part of, instead of us just reporting out what we're doing to them. But some of it I really am relying on their expertise and their input and their energy to figure out a good solution or a good workaround.
And I just jump in and say, so I just joined the board in January and then this hit. So I don't know a lot, but I have been amazed and impressed by Allison and her team and how adaptive they are being. This has like rocked the world of United Way and so many other organizations, but I have not yet heard like we're quitting or we're not doing this. It's how can we do this in a different way and still make it work?
I hang up the phone before I say those words. I'm joking.
Thanks. I really appreciate your honest participation and you're just being open and frank about all of this. Maybe as we start to wrap up here, as you thoughts or advice that you're having for your funders, advice for grantees, for those who are in the field, any reflections we can kind of go around, but it's maybe a little bit geared toward what advice are you giving? I really appreciate all the nature of the conversation and how each one of us are struggling with those same concerns and those same issues. Reflections, advice, thoughts that you might have sort of for people going forward as we go into the next season, so to speak.
I think what I have to say is groundbreaking, but for current grantees, I would say reach out to your funder. I had some great conversations with a nonprofit yesterday that was actually denied funding through our COVID relief grant, but they are a currently funded project. And so we were able to talk through obviously our board's feedback and all of that, but also ways to adjust their current grant to allow them to shift their operations. And so we were able to kind of come up with some creative solutions to, the travel budgets, don't really need that right now. And, how can we adjust that to maybe get a Zoom account or kind of what all that entailed. And so that has been really great. So we're about to undergo, we've done a lot of proactive communication, but we're about to have an onslaught of interim reports. And so I predict that the vast majority of my June and July will be having those conversations and finding creative ways to work within funds that have already been awarded to assist, clients as well as the nonprofits themselves, continue to keep them sustainable as they've lost fundraisers, they've lost funders. And so, I'm always, willing to field those calls, and I'm sure, everyone else on this call is as well.
I would just add, this is probably obvious, but don't try to get through this by yourself. None of us can. So do everything you can. Take advantage of every possible source of help and advice. I know a lot of organizations work very collaboratively already, but if you're someone who has kind of been the lone wolf in your community, or you've kind of done your own thing, now is the time to start reaching out and getting to know who's doing what in your area to see if there are ways that you can work together and help each other out. And I definitely agree with Bree's point about if you are a current grantee with somebody, please reach out to your program officer, whoever manages that, make sure they know what your situation is so that they can help you troubleshoot.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else groundbreaking to add. I guess I would maybe just say go easy on yourself. And there's still only 24 hours in the day, and we have to be here at the end of this, whatever this is, and however long it lasts. There were some heavy weeks in there with getting our relief fund launched and going from 0 to 90 in about 5 minutes, and trying to write a grant application and collect grant applications and review grant applications and pull the review committee together all within about a week. you know, I can't keep that up forever. And, you know, I'm only a human. And so yeah, don't forget to take care of yourself in this too. And that the work will unfortunately still be there when you get back. But take some time. You know, I've also taken a week off in this process. A couple weeks ago, just had to take a week off. And of course, I'm never completely off. Of course, I'm still checking in on email and jumping in on a call here and there. But, you know, just having to step away because this is looking like it's going to be a marathon. It's going to be here for a while. It's changing the way that we respond and the way that our organizations will look and the way that we fundraise, the way that we fund, the way that needs are handled in our community. And so I think we're all in for a long ride on this.
Kenny, did you have any reflections? Thanks, Allison. Kenny, did you have anything you want to add as we send folks off? So thanks to everybody participating. Shout out to Debbie Eller there at the City of College Station, who put some really good information in the chat. So make sure you guys grab that about the funding that's going on there. Kenny, some thoughts?
No, just again, another thanks. There was one question we didn't get to, and I think Allison Pennington touched on it, just thinking about the shift since we're talking about inequalities when we started out a little bit. And one of the questions that came through was, you know, bridging the digital divide, and that we know that there's a population of folks out there as we think about inequalities is how do we truly focus on, especially with our young folks, our young citizens, making sure that we can get our services out to that population of folks, and thinking through that is extremely important, being that that's the world that we seem to live in now, and the education being so important to the future. So I guess I would just end with that, and again, thank folks for joining us today, and to our panelists. Thank you all panelists. I appreciate it a lot. Next week, Dr. Robbie Robichaux is going to talk a little bit about social innovation. So look for the registration, and we have changed the Zoom link. So every week it's a different Zoom link. So make sure and get to the updated, get that through the registration. Allison, and Bree, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Kenny, appreciate you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
Take care.
Take care.